And we're going to be getting into this match between these two top-level trainers, Eduardo Cunha, Antonio Sanchez, battling it out in the top 4 here in Liverpool.
Here we go. We've got the Rillaboom and Ogerpon Half-Flame Mask over on Antonio's side versus the Golden Go and Incineroar double starter Pokemon. From the looks of things on one side, Intimidate is the really crucial drop here of the ability, right? You're able to all of a sudden bring -1 reductions onto both the Rillaboom and Ogerpon, which at this point are quite nice for Eduardo to position the nasty plot setup.
Yeah, I mean, like, Eduardo really would like to be the Terra Dragon that we saw in Regulation Set E in this situation, where you could flip the type coverage on its head,
right,
be able to maybe be susceptible to a fake out, but definitely not take as much damage from grass and fire type moves. As it stands, Raging Bolt is the Dragon type Pokemon of choice. Switching in there, as well as the Incineroar switching out, a double switch. We don't see that very often here in VGC, but it's the Tornadus and Raging Bolt trying to get the speed control for Eduardo setup.
Oh, very well-placed slot switch out there, as the Rocky Helmet is the item choice on that Tornadus, whilst we're going to have the Sword Stance set up on the Ogerpon, now bringing it up to +1 of its attack. But because the Incineroar was switched out, it'll be able to throw it back down to neutral unless we see a Terastallization on it.
Yeah, going up to 1+ in that case. And I really like the way that Antonio has positioned the Ogerpon to be able to take advantage of the fake-out pressure that Rillaboom provides. The Tailwind here is not going to be doing too much in this situation, where the Raging Bolt is not going to be able to hit the Ogerpon in the way that it really wants to, but that Ogerpon is going to be able to hit back with that Terrafire.
Things are getting a bit spicy, and this Ogerpon is at +1. But guess what? We have the rain being set up to sizzle down the flames as much as they can do. Ivy Cudgel is going to be opting in, targeting down the Tornadus, but what? Still so much damage being dealt in the rain. Draco Meteor not quite enough to pick up the KO there, allowing this Rillaboom to get some pivot action going. I do suspect this may be a very high-level pivot action board states changing matchup.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you look at the Incineroar and the Rillaboom, they're going to be able to go for U-turns and parting shots wherever they particularly please, especially with the defensive typing and the rain now being set up. But I want to call out here the damage that Raging Bolt did. Even though it's at 2 stages of decreased special attack right now, it's putting the Ogerpon in range of a Thunderclap. Now, it might not be in range of a Thunderclap for very long with that grassy terrain recovery on the field, but still something that both of these trainers really have to take into account. And with Antonio bringing that Fluttermane in, it's not going to be able to redirect any attacks away from the Ogerpon. It's not going to be able to fake out to stop that going off. Instead, it's going to be trying to put the offensive pressure onto the field, make this Tornadus and the Raging Bolt think twice before they act on this turn.
And I think Eduardo's side, wanting to get the Tailwind set up, will likely want to try to bring that Golden Go from the mid to end game setup. Maybe get some very quick KOs, outspeed, if possible, this Fluttermane, but we know it is speed boosted because of the booster energy, and most of the times that does indicate that even under Tailwind, the Golden Go may not be able to outspeed it, but once again, dependent on the training here.
Yeah, I think that this is a prime opportunity for this Fluttermane to think about maybe going for a Calm Mind in this situation in front of 2 special-based attackers, but not before Rillaboom comes in. Best buddies with Fluttermane, trying to make sure it's got that fake-out pressure in play, but in response, Eduardo switching out the Tornadus, not getting the Tailwind up onto the field, so this Rillaboom is going to have the speed priority coming into the next turn, and here's the Calm Mind.
And that's the thing about leaving wiggle room for Antonio to get this Calm Mind set up. It's quite dangerous, as the Raging Bolt doesn't directly threaten it because it is at -2 of its special attack, because it's still on the field and hasn't been better utilized with a switch out, which could have been the option. But it's more so wanting to gauge Antonio's threat level right now. Does he want to go on the offensive and just try to pick up any sort of damage he can, or get the setup going, which so far it's working out for Antonio getting the setup?
Yeah, like, this is where the Tornadus going for the rain dance there, it was right at the time, but now it's kind of not really doing so well, where that Fluttermane and that Rillaboom take a lot less damage from Incineroar's Flare Blitz, but it does get that that Tornadus on the switch in.
Meaning the Golden Go really needs to start getting things going, getting the damage dealt, or getting set up with a nasty plot, because this Fluttermane is going to start becoming a big issue. We know that the Golden Go has leftovers. It doesn't have a damage boosting item on itself in order to try to guarantee a KO, and now that the Calm Mind's been set up, this Fluttermane, it's at +1 of its special defense. It may not go down immediately.
It's definitely not going to go down to a Make It Rain, but it could go down to a combination of Make It Rain and a Flare Blitz, or even a knockoff in this situation where, I mean, its booster energy has been activated. Knockoff's going to be doing a little bit less damage, but it's not taken damage away from it from the rain. So I'm not quite sure. My mental maths isn't quite that quick in this situation as to which one does more damage, but I'm sure Eduardo will know straight away.
And I think he may go ahead and show us as well. But first, we're going to see the Fairy Terastallization. Moonblast, though, comes out from the Fluttermane, deals a lot of damage that we would be more akin to seeing from a Choice Specs variant with that +1 in its special attack. But Golden Go does get that nasty plot set up. We see that Eduardo wants to try to get that damage set up to the point where you can start sweeping, and that's been the main thing. You are, however, running out of Tailwind turns.
You are, and this is a bit of a double-edged sword in this situation where you go for the Fairy Terror on Eduardo's side to be able to take a Shadow Ball in that situation. Antonio not falling for that, getting extra damage onto the Incineroar instead. Now you've committed your Terror, and especially with the U-turn coming out from Antonio, that Rillaboom later down the line is going to be putting so much damage onto the Golden Go because the Golden Go's lost that grass-type resistance. So many things going on there, and we're finishing off the turn with Incineroar getting on out of there with a parting shot, bringing this Fluttermane down to neutral stages of special attack. Yeah, neutral at this point. Doesn't mean that the Fluttermane can't get another Calm Mind set up, but it'd be a bit risky in the face of this Golden Go at +2 of its special attack. However, right now, I do really like what Antonio is actually opting to go for. He's going to preserve the Rillaboom in order to bring the grass terrain at some point in the future turn. And as the Tailwind does expire, you're just going to be able to threaten so much with the Grassy Glides onto this Golden Go that no longer has the Steel typing in order to allow it to resist those Grass-type moves, focusing in on that slot. Fake Out going into the Golden Go here and making sure that it's not going to be acting on this turn. And another Calm Mind, you called it perfectly there, Costa, getting that Fluttermane yet more set up, making it very difficult for the Raging Bolt to even be able to do any damage in this situation, but it's gonna do its best, and you can see the effect of that Calm Mind and just how effective it is in these situations. Yeah, or not effective for that Raging Bolt Thunderbolt at all. I guess there could have been out of maybe picking up a Paralysis. That would add a bit more of a thorn on Antonio's side, but there's just so many resources still available to Antonio. And over on Eduardo's side, the Tornadus now being out for the count means you no longer have Tailwind. You no longer have the option of getting that Rain Dance set up. And at this point, you don't have a way to directly threaten the Rillaboom and Ogerpon unless you try to utilize the Incineroar, which is in the back. Well, it's a nasty plot coming out from the Golden Go, not falling for the Fluttermane's Protect here in this situation, and a Thunderbolt coming out into that Incineroar. You can see how well it is trained as well, especially defensively, getting the parting shot and getting on out of there. Yeah, great rotations from this Incineroar, just doing what an Incineroar is meant to do, going ahead and just creating thorns in your opponent's plan there. You want to get the pivots going, have Fake Out immediately accessible once again with this Rillaboom. And this is why Rillaboom and Incineroar have ever since they were available in a format of VGC to be played with each other, they just have some great synergy, and the Fake Out pressure and pivotness is just so good to see. It really is, but actually, in this situation, I'm wondering if Antonio has the opportunity to call that Incineroar on the switch-in. The combination of Grassy Glide and Moonblast at 1 stages of increased special attack would be probably enough to pick up the KO on this Golden Go overall. And if that's the case, Golden Go is going to want to protect itself. Somehow, some way, the Incineroar is going to be going in. Eduardo opting to try and do that with the Raging Bolt being KO'd this turn.
Nicely called, as the Fake Out did try to hone down onto the Golden Go, but failed. But guess what didn't? Or actually did. The KO from the Flutter Mane Moonblast wasn't quite enough, but it dealt so much damage onto an Assault Vest Raging Bolt, which we know it has great amounts of HP, generally speaking. That's even without the training, but it is accompanied by the Assault Vest, further bolting up its special defense prowess.
The Assault Vest, though, really not proving very good for Eduardo in this situation. Would have preferred it to get knocked out so you can bring the Incineroar in. Now there is no defense for this Golden Go, or a less likely defense for it being able to protect. So Eduardo's got to hope that this Golden Go is able to, one, outspeed the Rillaboom at risk of the Wood Hammer rather than the Grassy Glide. If it does, then you can potentially get a Make It Rain off, but you've got to hope the Intimidate in the back from that Incineroar is enough to be able to have this Golden Go take both the effectively Choice Specs Moonblast as well as this Grassy Glide from the Rillaboom.
It's going to be tricky, and it's going to come down to the wire as well, as Incineroar has switched in. It's going to get that attack drop on the Rillaboom, but it has the Fake Out pressure the following turn. Protect coming out from that Flutter Mane. Make It Rain, however, will be dispatching all of its ferocious damage output onto this Rillaboom, but just missed shy from picking up the KO.
The Assault Vest there coming in clutch for the Rillaboom. It's going to be U-turning back onto Antonio's side of the field. He's going to be able to get his own Incineroar in, and depending on the training between these two Incineroar, it will matter as to which one is able to get that Fake Out off. Of course, Golden Go has dropped its special attack in the process, so is less and less capable of being able to knock out this Flutter Mane in one. If Antonio is able to sort of carry on getting this sort of damage reduction down onto the Golden Go by the time that he actually does commit to the attack onto the Golden Go, then it could be a very difficult scenario to him. But Ogerpon now joining the fray. Incineroar's on the field, no Intimidate left to come onto the field. Embody Aspect raising the attack of that Ogerpon.
And I like the fact that we've just got this cycling action going on from Antonio's side, bringing in the Ogerpon at the most crucial moment in order to try to finally get a big amount of damage dealt onto Eduardo's side, hopefully picking up a KO. But then again, there's a case where it may want to go a bit on the defensive and be a bit more wary on whether that double up will successfully connect with the Golden Go based on whether there's going to be a defensive play or not on Eduardo's side.
Well, it's a spiky shield starting off the turn for the Ogerpon on Antonio's side of the field. A Fake Out does land its way into it, but the Flutter Mane has committed to a different attack while Incineroar has taken a little bit of damage.
Damage indeed is the name of the game. The Incineroar is out for the count, bringing Eduardo down to his final two Pokemon, but not without a final say at least from this Golden Go, as the Make It Rain is dispatched, is enough to pick up the KO as well. And now Antonio is in the lead, 3-2 with that one-hit KO.
And it's going to be one of the two Fake Out Pokemon coming back into the fray for Antonio. And with that Assault Vest onto the Raging Bolt on Eduardo's side of the field, the question is which Pokemon does get faked out? If you fake out the Golden Go and the Raging Bolt gets a Thunderclap off onto Ogerpon on Antonio's side of the field, well, it might be able to pick up the KO from this HP range. Equally, if you go for the Fake Out onto the Raging Bolt, that Golden Go is still at 2 stages of increased special attack, and a big Make It Rain or a Shadow Ball could be coming out and taking another knockout here. With the Golden Go still at full HP, that might be too much for Antonio to be able to get through, and we're starting off with a Protect on that Golden Go.
Yeah, I think Eduardo has recognized that the Golden Go is really the main carry right here. there as the fake out actually targets the Golden Go rather than the Raging Ball. Grassy Glide, enough to pick up the KO. A +1 in the grassy terrain, further boosting and having additional multipliers on the field. And all of a sudden, Antonio's in the lead, 3-1.
That is the way that you deal with a thunderclap. You just out-prioritize it and get that big damage onto the field. What a way to play that turn, Costa. I wasn't expecting that to be able to get the knockout, but you're absolutely right. Boosted by that grassy terrain, it was enough. Now it's going to follow up with an Ivy Cudgel, land its way into the Golden Go. It looks like it's got the critical hit. It's a one-hit knockout. Antonio taking game 1 of this top 4 set.
Wow, what a bonk from the Ogerpon Half-Flame Master there in what stellar fashion, being able to just utilize the burst damage potential at the appropriate time. You got rid of the Incineroar. You were able to make sure that the Ogerpon was now on the field mid towards end game and not have to incur another Intimidate drop.
And that's really important with the way that the Ogerpon was positioned by Antonio in that game, where it took a bit of damage. It got its first couple of bonks off onto the field.
Yeah.
Then it took quite a bit of damage in reply from the Thunderbolt from the Raging Bolt, if I remember correctly. But either way, it took a lot of damage.
Yep.
And so the Draco Meteor from the Raging Bolt, that was it.
Yep.
And when that Draco Meteor landed and the Ogerpon went down to pretty low health, I was thinking, hey, you got to be a bit careful here of that. And Antonio showed why it was so important to be careful. But also, I want to call out the timing there, because the grassy terrain did actually leave the field after that Ogerpon went for the grassy glide. So there wasn't another turn. You'd have had to switch the Incineroar out to Rillaboom to be able to reset it to get that KO if you didn't before.
But the fact that Antonio did have that Rillaboom position to be in the back to allow for that subsequent turn scenario to unfold means that he had a very well-rounded understanding of the board position. And it's that synergy between a couple of his Pokemon. You know, you've got the pivot action from the Rillaboom, from that Incineroar. Then you've got the options of having the instant burst damage potential with the Ogerpon Half-Flame Mask with that Embody Aspect +1 in its attack, and the setup option. So you got a couple of different roles already being merged around the fake-out pressure, the utility of the grassy terrain. So a really solid call from Antonio. So Eduardo is going to really have to think hard on the adaptations. But Ben, what would you like to see going into this game too from Eduardo?
I think there's two things. First is the not committing the Terror quite so early onto the Golden Go. You could see why there was a risk of a Shadow Ball coming out from that Flutter Mane in game 1. But I would like to see him hold on to that, because it seemed very clear that Antonio wanted to take out that Incineroar. That was the key Pokemon that he was really targeting down in that set. And use that nasty plot to better effect. Get the odd Shadow Ball off here rather than the Make It Rains. Keep that special attack.
But let's see how it unfolds, and we already have instant adaptations. We got the Farigiraf over on Antonio's side with that Urshifu Rapid Strike versus the Incineroar and the Tornadus.
It's a notorious lead here from Regulation Set E. You've got the Choice Scarf on that Urshifu Rapid Strike, and it's going to be very able to go for a helping hand on the Farigiraf, get the Surging Strike's power boosted, and that's going to be able to launch into either the Tornadus or the Incineroar to get a KO here if he wants to do that. Now, the Incineroar has got the Terra Water, but if Antonio forces Eduardo to go for the Terra so early in the game, it's going to give him a lot of security later in the game to be able to deal with that, but it's actually just a U-turn.
Lovely little read there, and that was a bit risky for Eduardo. Him just staring Antonio in his eyes and saying, right, I know you're not going to try to go for it. It's a bit too obvious, trying to force me into the Terra. You're not going to go for the play. So, no Terra to be found on this Incineroar. No fake out, of course, because the Farigiraf is likely just going to be a parting shot here as double Bleak Windstorm connects right there, and knock off, not quite enough to pick up that KO. Does knock off the Throat Spray, but we do have the Hyper Voice retaliating, dealing a tiny bit more damage, but actually really a good turn 1 for Eduardo there.
Yeah, lots of chip damage all across the board, both the Incineroars, the Tornadus, but the important thing, I think, is that Farigiraf damage that it took. Even though it was able to take that knockoff, now kind of leaves Antonio with a really difficult scenario where Eduardo's probably got the better end of that turn, because now the Farigiraf is a little bit more of a sitting duck.
And talking about sitting duck, it definitely goes for that protect. It wants to make sure it is still on the field, perhaps susceptible to any sort of damage and KOs from this side. Bleak Windstorm from the Tornadus once again connects, and the very well accurate parting shot being targeted into that Incineroar, actually foreboding or foregoing any sort of blocked status, focus down onto that protect.
And it's going to be Eduardo to choose how he wants to react to that situation. He knows now that the Farigiraf has gone for the protect, so it's an opportunity to get his own Pokemon in and a parting shot as a reply from Antonio.
Yeah, a bit of communication being exchanged by these two kittens here.
We won't say what it is.
We definitely won't say what it is, but we know that unfortunately is going to be lowering that damage output of both of the Pokemon. But yeah, Raging Bolt now at -1 is definitely not what Eduardo wants to see, especially now that the Urshifu is on the field.
This is a really fascinating switch in here for Antonio, and I'm wondering if it's a little bit of a bait where the Urshifu comes in is like, hey, thunderclap this slot please, because now I want your Raging Bolt to have one of those sort of dead turns where I switch back out and get the position that I really want to be in, but Eduardo not falling for it at all.
No, it goes for the Tailwind and the Thunderbolt. It outspeeds the Urshifu, but it does not pick up the KO thanks to that parting shot, but it does actually pick up a paralysis, but it does actually go through the paralysis. It is not halted by it. It goes for the close combat, deals a 2-hit KO on that front, so the damage has been dealt in combination with the Psychic. Not quite enough to pick up a KO, but surely any other attack going into that slot, at least neutrally, should be enough.
Baiting the bait there for both of these trainers, where it's like Antonio's saying, yeah, target the Thunderclap into me, and Eduardo's going, no, I'm just going to Tailwind and go for the Thunderbolt and do a lot of damage there. Now with the paralysis, the Urshifu is never going to outspeed any Pokemon. It's a free turn to attack into that slot. Antonio therefore wanting to protect the Farigiraf into the next turn, knowing that the Urshifu has no longer got too much utility and letting it go down.
Yeah, I think at that point you just want a free slot to be brought in, hence why there was no sort of reactive action taking place from Antonio on that side of the field. But I want to touch a bit onto the fact that there's that Tailwind interaction with the Raging Bolt. You are going up against a Choice Scarfed Urshifu. Dependent on how it is trained, there could be a scenario where it can still outspeed a Tailwind Raging Bolt, but that's based on both of the tiering there. So that could have been something that was on both of these trainers' minds.
And ones that both of these trainers will now know going into a Game 3 if Eduardo is able to pull this back. He's looking in a fantastic position where he's got the Tailwind up, he's got a lot of damage on the field. The Incineroar has come in, it's offering some fake out pressure, but Golden Go's not going to worry about that whatsoever. The only risk is a Flare Blitz on the switch in, but it's not, it's a fake out coming into the Golden Go.
It's a fake out. Nice switch there. Bleak Windstorm connects with both of its targets yet again outside of rain conditions, picks up the KO onto the Farigiraf and brings that Incineroar that tiny bit further down with its HP. However, we do have Rillaboom on the field. If there's a Rillaboom, there is a way, although the resources right now are very limited on Antonio's side.
I think it's going to be very difficult for Antonio to come back from this game. All the Tornadus needs to be able to do is protect itself this turn from any fake outs, and then it's just going to be able to go for Bleak Wind Storms, of course. Golden Go not susceptible to any of those fake outs. And now the Incineroar probably in range of a Make It Rain, so a very safe play that this Golden Go has to go for. And this Rillaboom only has access to grass and bug coverage.
As we're going to see the switch out from Eduardo's side, just wanting to make sure he is always that one step ahead with his switches. Now that, of course, he does have those additional slots available. Intimidate drop on both of Antonio's side. And just to make sure there's additional setup with Bleak Wind Storms, the Rain Dance has been actioned on this front. Woodhammer not healing much at all onto this Incineroar, other than proccing the berry, which is a bit counterintuitive if you are that Rillaboom. But yeah, it's looking a bit tough, even with this Flare Blitz now being counteracted because of the rain being set.
This is why Eduardo Cunha is one of the strongest players in Europe here. the Golden Go probably could have got through that turn, no problem, especially when the Tornadus commits the Rain Dance as well to lower the damage from a Flare Blitz. But Eduardo covering for the opportunity of a couple of critical hits there, not wanting to lose the Golden Go, knowing that he wants to get that Bleak Wind Storm fully accurate. Now it is in the rain. Rillaboom's getting a speed drop, and it's a Flare Blitz follow-up onto the Incineroar, and Incineroar has gone bye-bye. This Rillaboom's gonna struggle to be able to get through all of the remainder of Eduardo's 4 Pokemon in any reasonable fashion.
Yeah, a bit of a mirrored affair between Game 1 and Game 2 amongst these two veteran trainers. The fact that we saw Antonio just position himself so well in that Game 1, now it's been completely reversed, topsy-turvy onto its head, because Eduardo has done such a good job in being able to utilize the best that he can with the switches versus that Farigiraf, which feels like it lowered a bit of the steam.
It did. Yeah, the Farigiraf really came to the game and didn't really do much. You got knocked off the Throat Spray on turn 1. Eduardo takes us to a Game 3, of course, here. And yeah, I like the Farigiraf being on the field. Okay, it's got Helping Hand, but in fact, actually, let me just double check that, because it might be incorrect there.
Oh, it does not.
It does not have Helping Hand, so actually relying on the Throat Spray Hyper Voice to be able to do a lot of damage. That got knocked off in the first turn as we saw the Hyper Voice come away. And I think Antonio had a lot better damage potential when he really leaned into that Flutter Mane and the Ogerpon. I think looking at that, it's really difficult to commit to bringing that 2 games in a row, because you know Eduardo's going to adjust to it. So I can understand the thinking there, but I would like to see it back in Game 3.
Yeah, and I think the Farigiraf, you've got to really take into consideration when to bring it. And because based on its set, of course, whether it is more offensively inclined or defensively with support, there's a sort of like a ticking time limit on its utility and sustainability on the field. Like, great, it's going to be able to absorb some damage, but what is it really doing for this matchup other than, I guess, blocking some fake outs? But surely Eduardo's just going to say, right, I don't need to go for the priority. I'll just go for my parting shots. I'll go for my dedicated damage that I know I can guarantee, especially accompanied by that speed control.
And we're going to be seeing the Rillaboom and the Flutter Mane. It's back onto the field, ladies and gentlemen. And Antonio, Eduardo leading out with the Incineroar and the Golden Go. And this is a prime opportunity again for the Calm Mind potential onto the Flutter Mane, as well as the Nasty Plot potential on the Golden Go. Rillaboom is going to lead the fake out war in this situation, where it's going to be able to stop the Golden Go the Incineroar going for its own fake out, or pivoting out with an expanding, with a parting shot. Costa, apparently this Game 3 is too much for me right now.
It's definitely too much for me as well, Ben, don't worry. As I think Antonio trying to go back to basics in reference to that Game 1. However, met with the Golden Go straight off the bat is definitely something he doesn't want to see, but he's actually gone for the Calm Mind, knowing most likely his couch, knowing he will most likely survive any sort of Make It Rains that come out, which will be left to be seen. Yeah, 2-hit KO, wow.
50% damage from a Make It Rain. Have Incineroar from the Rillaboom into that Incineroar, and the Rillaboom able to leave the field.
And of course, getting that pivot action going, wanting to bring in that Incineroar, not only do you drop that Intimidate or attack drop on the Incineroar over on Eduardo's side, but you can directly threaten the Golden Go right now. But parting shot from one kitten yet again to another gets another pivot action going, at least now on Eduardo's side. So this could be a readjustment if, of course, he's opted to go for another type of Pokemon in the back, but we've gotten a bit of a sneak peek. It doesn't seem to be the case. However, the fact that Tornadus is now brought in is so critical, because you can start setting up to the point where you get the Tailwind procced, and perhaps you can outspeed depending on which Pokemon is trying to attack.
this is a situation in game 1 where Eduardo would have been committing terror on the Golden Go, but with 1 stage of decreased special attack, I wouldn't be surprised to see Eduardo bring that out into the back 4 a little bit later on. And maybe that gives Antonio a little bit of an opportunity to target down into that Tornadus, try to remove it before the tailwind goes up in combination with a fake out, because of course it is carrying that rocky helmet rather than a covert cloak. But you could see the Shadow Ball going straight into the Golden Go.
Oh, and it picks up the KO. Golden Go is out. 1 hit shotted from that +1 special attack. Calm-minded. A Flutter Main, Bleak Wind Storm not dealing much at all because of the +1 special defense. Only going to be taking a parting shot for its troubles, even though it has connected on both targets. But most importantly, that was a bit of a dare or chicken. I don't remember the name of the game. But the point is, they were both staring each other off, and at that point, it's whoever would flinch first.
And it seemed like neither of these trainers were flinching whatsoever. Antonio got the better end of that, where getting a knockout on the Golden Go is really, really big. That's going to put this Flutter Main in a situation where it's really not able to be KO'd very quickly by any of Antonio's Pokemon. Sure, you can go for Bleak Wind Storms. You can go for Flare Blitzes into it. I think that's the biggest threat right now from it. But equally, with the revolving fake outs that Antonio has on his side of the field, and we've seen him adjust into so well, it's only a matter of Moonblast before that Incineroar just gets knocked out.
As the Tornadus is going to be switching out, maybe wanting to be kept for further Tailwind, further down the line actually, maybe even Rain Dance setups. However, the fake out will be targeting the Incineroar. It will not be able to move, and will be taking a lot of damage from this Flutter Main. So at the current moment, we've got a Flutter Main that is recovering from the grassy terrain that's currently available and is at +1 for special attack and special defense. This is starting to get a bit out of hand for Eduardo.
Yeah, Terry's got the real run of the game so far, and especially with the damage that +1 stages of special attack Flutter Main did to the Incineroar, we know that it's going to be KO'd by another Moonblast.
Yep.
So in this spot, Eduardo's kind of left switching around all of his Pokemon, but there's only so many times that you can switch into a Moonblast before your KO, your Pokemon gets knocked out.
Yep.
And especially since Incineroar isn't able to protect itself, Raging Bolt is a special attacker, which Flutter Main has taken advantage of with the Calm Mind. It's going to be very difficult without any sort of critical hits going off, or without the Tailwind that yet hasn't been set up, even though the Tornadus was on the field for a couple of turns already.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the awkward stance that Eduardo's having to deal with. But yeah, I mean, he doesn't have to think that much further, because he's down to 2 final Pokemon because of the Moonblast KO. Thunderbolt, not quite enough to pick up the KO. They're just going to show why this Calm Mindset is really running about free at this point, and just being such a crucial piece to Antonio's strategy in this matchup. But we've got the pivot action going once more. Incineroar is on the field, and this really isn't looking good for Eduardo.
Now Eduardo doesn't have any fake out pressure of his own because that Incineroar got knocked out last turn, and Antonio has 2 Pokemon with fake out, and of course with the Raging Bolt carrying that Assault Vest, it's not going to be able to protect itself from any attacks. Tornadus may be able to knock out the Flutter Main, but we've seen the speed priorities. Flutter Main is faster than the Tornadus, so there's a really easy fake out and a Moonblast go that could be launching out into this Raging Bolt to do a lot of damage.
But first, we are going to see that Fairy Terror being utilized by this Raging Bolt. It wants to forego its weakness to Fairy typing and just try to make sure it can survive as best as possible whilst getting the Tailwind set up on its side, which it does, notably, and there is no special attack drop. Bleak Wind Storm does connect and pick up the K on Flutter Main. However, it's that sort of scenario we were discussing about earlier, Ben. It's the resource availability that you have remaining. We do not know the final Pokemon from Antonio, but there's a big assumption it may be that Ogerpon.
It could be that Ogerpon, but the Rillaboom is probably going to be enough to pick up the win here for Antonio, because in going for the Terra Fairy and making yourself no longer weak to Fairy, as you called out.
Yep.
Instead, you take neutral damage from both fire and grass attacks. That's going to be especially important now that Ogerpon has joined the fray and Antonio has not yet committed his terrestrialization. That means this Ogerpon can go for the Terra, get its embody aspect going, launch out really powerful Ivy Cudgels, and it's not then going to be weak to any bleak wind storms. So in terms of order of operation here, you are able to knock out the Raging Bolt this turn, not faint from the combination of Raging Bolt's attacks and as well as Tornadus's attacks potentially, and then you're able to go after the Tornadus.
And we are now going to get the final terrestrialization of this game, potentially of this set, or most definitely of this set, as the embody aspect will be powering up this Ogerpon's already powerful damage output to +1 as Rain Dance is set up. However, the damage is going to still come out. Will it be enough is the real question right now. Is Antonio going to make it through to the finals? Highly likely. There still is a chance for this Tornadus, but my word, has he been able to accomplish a great feat right now.
And a parting shot going to be finishing off the turn. That Incineroar going to be switching out for the Rillaboom. The Rain Dance was a valiant effort, but it was not enough to stop that Ogerpon with its embody aspect attack boost from being able to knock out this Terra Fairy Raging Bolt. Raging Bolt has been so crucial for many trainers yet in this tournament so far, but unfortunately for Eduardo, it's going down this turn. It's Tornadus versus the Rillaboom, Incineroar, and Ogerpon.
And the writing is on the wall, ladies and gents. We're just going to go through, of course, a couple, likely more turns, but the real question is right now, can this Tornadus try to bring this back? Is there some sort of path that remains for victory? And Swords Dance, taking advantage of any potential protects there, wants to try to make sure you can go for as much damage as you can with that Ogerpon.
I was going to say, yes, there could be a chance in this scenario for Eduardo Cunha as the Grassy Glide goes on into the Tornadus. The Rocky Helmet taking some damage in reply, but an Ivy Cudgel boosted twice by the Swords Dance, boosted once by the Embody Aspect. The rain is not enough, and it is going to be Antonio Sanchez making his way to the finals in the Liverpool Regional Championships.